Hi, and welcome to episode 42 of the Breaking Bio podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson, a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. Today we've got a special guest, Josh Witten, but first we'll introduce our co-host, Heidi.
I'm Heidi Smith. I'm a postdoc at the University of Texas at Austin.
And as I mentioned, we have Josh Witten of the Finch and Pea joining us today. So Josh, you want to say hello and tell us a little bit what you got going on, which is quite a lot from what...
Hi, I am Josh Witten. I used to be a biological researcher at the Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge, England, where I was doing my postdoc. I now live in the middle of South Carolina, in a little town called Hartsville, where I run a consulting company called the Finch and Pea Group. I also am adjunct faculty teaching biology at Coker College, and I'm Director of Development for Thomas Hart Academy.
Cool. That's a lot going on right there, and I'm sure there's all sorts for us to talk about for the next half an hour or so.
Yeah, I wear many hats. So. I was going to mention I'm a researcher for another podcast called Skeptically Speaking, hosted by Desiree Schell, out of Edmonton, Canada.
Oh, cool.
Oh, Morgan's like, hey, Canada, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
What?
Since you do so many things, and I know some of them must just be, might not be every day, but could you take us through like a typical day?
A lot of variation from day to day, but like today, got up, got the kids off to school, went to Coker, taught my biology class, went to Thomas Hart Academy, met with the head of the school there to talk about strategy for our annual fund campaign and things with that, and then what did I do after? Then went back to Coker College to do office hours, and to pick my kids up from school. Came back, did some general work around the Finch and Pea blog, fixed a problem with sharing to Twitter, and a little bit of social media, and then dinner and this. So it's most days, a lot of variation from day to day, but most days are some version of chaos like that. A lot of switching gears every hour or so.
How did you get started with your blog?
I got started with the blog while I was doing my PhD at Washington University in St. Louis. The postdoc, Michael White, who writes for Finch and Pea, also shared the lab day with me. I think mainly got tired of talking to me about science stuff, and he was already writing a blog, and suggested that that instead of chewing his ear off, I start writing the stuff down. So at that point, I started an independent blog that was called The Rugbyologist back in the day, and excuse me. And after a while doing that, so I was getting close to graduating. Mike was working hard on his postdoc stuff, and we thought, we were writing about a lot of this similar stuff. We had a lot of similar interests, and we're looking for a place we could blog where we could be a little bit more creative about what we do and really kind of execute our vision. And so that's when we decided that, one, if we partnered up, we wouldn't have to be under so much pressure individually to create content all the time. And two, we could actually create a blog that really kind of fit science communication the way we like to do it, as opposed to the way that other people thought we were supposed to do it. And that's how the Finch and Pea came about, which is mainly we like to sit around, drink beer, and talk about science, but not necessarily about the stuff everybody else called important.
So you've mentioned a couple of times the rugby, and judging by your CV off of the Finch and Pea, it looked like you were playing fairly serious rugby throughout your PhD, which is something that maybe a lot of people don't normally think about. If you think of somebody doing their PhD, it's usually thinking head down, tail up, only in the lab. But I love seeing people
Well, in
doing
fairness,
outside
it did
interests.
take me a little longer to get my PhD than average. But I kind of switched projects halfway through too, which is what I prefer to blame that on.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of it just becomes, prioritizing what you want, you're interested in, what you want to do,
Hmm.
and um, and people make different choices about that. I was doing that, but I was also waking up at 5:30 in the morning to go to the gym and working out, and and because it's in the United States amateur rugby, I was, when my kids came along, that pretty much was the end of my rugby career because I could not, you could no longer balance those things
Hmm.
appropriately, and sort of, what do you have time for? And you have to, I mean, gradually you do have to work hard, but there is at least for me, it was not productive to try to work, 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
I
No.
a lot of those hours would be wasted, and I was a better worker during, those hours if I took other hours and did something that was, you know, totally different. If I went and ran into people for a couple of hours every couple of days, that was made the hours that I was working more effective than they
I
would
try
have
to
been
I try to
if
do
they were
that in
too long.
lab to run into people, but it's not. I mean, it's not
They
rugby.
don't
It's
like it
just
very
Not.
much in the
yeah,
lab. No,
It's not organized that way.
yeah. It's not. It's not. Or I just try to barrel down the hallway and hit people and see what can happen.
yeah. Well, at least in my case, they usually got out of the way if I tried to do that, which was
I feel like no
really
one would do
helpful
that
at
for
times.
me.
Hide the pinball.
We did use having me come tackle people as a threat for, like, make sure that the fume hoods were kept clean and things like that.
There's just like
Lab
a picture of
enforcer.
you, a
Yeah,
picture of you
yeah,
looking insane.
yeah. Well, it didn't need much. I would regularly show up into the lab with a couple of black eyes and bruises all that. You got this at my thesis defense. My wife gave my thesis advisor a picture of me after I just had taken after a game where I'd had a guy stomp on my face. And put that up right before my thesis defense. Which is,
That's
it
amazing.
was a good. It was a very nice introduction by my thesis advisor, but that was not a pretty picture. But I believe he presented it as if I regularly showed up to the lab looking like that. But that was sort of an extreme example. But the idea, showing up with a black eye and was a little bit different, but that was okay. I mean, in that area where I was, we also had a female rugby player in the area too, who was regularly injuring herself and such too. But
Wow,
That's
that's
cool.
and it's
incredible.
actually a little bit more. She was much smaller and fast and tough as nails. So it's a lot easier to run into people when you weigh 220 pounds than being tiny. So
I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes to show that finding the right lab for you is really important.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people who have wanted outside interests like this, maybe not as violent or extreme as black-eyed rugby, but I've seen a lot of people squander and have hard times in labs because the culture of the lab is you got to work the whole time and you may be slightly ostracized if you're not in there working
Yeah.
24/7.
I think it's very important. I mean, and there's other personal dynamics and things like that can come into it. That even if your thesis advisor is great on some things, they might not be on others. That, at least for me, I came in to my graduate work very interested in biology, but not having a very specific thing that I wanted to work on. And I came in, having gotten some good advice, I think, very focused on finding a thesis advisor where the mentor-mentee personal relationship was going to be strong. There was going to be good support for sort of work-life balance, somebody that exhibited that in their successful in their work, but demonstrated that balance, not just paid lip service to it, but actually executed it in their own life. That was very important to me in choosing a lab. That was more important than the project in choosing a lab. I think I've wound up finding a great fit between the thesis advisor, Brock Cohen, at Washington University in St. Louis, and the kind of stuff that they work on there too, the genetic and genomics work that goes on there. That it was actually a really excellent fit all around. But in choosing, I really prioritized that being able to have that kind of personal relationship that fit who I was and fit who he was appropriately. And I think we often don't emphasize that enough, that there is this mentor-mentee relationship that is really the most important element of PhD training, because it's training you to become a scientist. It's not just about the project. And the project needs to be interesting. And there's a lot. It's important, but that training relationship is really a key element.
I think that's super important. Also, your fit in the lab. I think when you interview at places, or when you rotate in different labs, these people are going to be your family for the next couple of years. So it's really important. I think for the feedback that PIs ask students and postdocs for, like, how would she fit here? I think that's good. That's something that people consider.
Yes, yeah. The culture, because the thing is, when you start a PhD, you're going to be there for a long time. You're making a long-term decision about who you're going to be working with and around, no matter how big a lab is. When it comes to being in academia and getting your PhD, even the biggest labs are pretty small workplaces overall. You'd call a lab with 30 people in it a big lab, but a business with 30 people working in it is a small business.
Right.
And so these are and it doesn't take very many people that are bad fits to ruin, to make that culture unpleasant for people.
Right. It makes the whole atmosphere unpleasant, but it's also really unpleasant for that person. And you don't have to be a bad egg to be a bad fit. You can be a
It's not necessarily it's a bad apple in that context, not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's something that could be very productive in another lab. And I think it's very important for people to, talk about the lab culture and stuff. When you're rotating, and you want somebody as a thesis advisor who's attuned to the importance of that culture, because once you're there are going to be new people coming in and old people going out, and so you want somebody that's going to, have a sense for what they want their lab to feel like and be like, and that they're going to try to maintain some consistency of that. Obviously, it changes as people come and go, but they're attuned to the idea that they want people that fit into that lab culture. And I think that's also very important, because you go into a rotation, somebody might be having a bad 2 months. It could be a great fit, and that person actually could be a great person to have around the lab, but you're rotating in the 2 months where nothing is working, or their kid is colicky, and they're not sleeping. There can be a number of things that go into it. So it's you have to think a little bit beyond just sort of your short-term, immediate experience. I found it very useful times when I was doing my rotation. I talked to people who had rotated in a lab and not joined. Previously, I talked to people who had joined the lab and then switched labs. I found that wasn't necessarily something that, essentially those things you get the answers that, somebody who leaves, it doesn't dissuade you from joining the lab. It's just, you want to know why. And sometimes their whys are things that actually encourage you to join the lab.
Right.
And sometimes they're not. So it's it's like the kids in my bio class. They can answer a question on a quiz correctly, and it can still give me information about something I need to cover on a go back and cover again. They technically got the question right, but you can see the hints that there's some sort of deeper misunderstanding. They got the superficial thing right, but like, I don't think you're quite getting this. So we'll just go, we can go back and cover that. Yeah. There's more information than the fundamental. Because like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean a thesis advisor is bad. or that student was bad. It just may have been a bad fit. This isn't, this is a very small interpersonal, very personal dynamics between people. And you're going to be there for, this is a long-term relationship in a PhD lab.
Yeah, a lot longer than most people at that age is like actual relationships.
Yeah, and you're often choosing them with much, after, a couple of weeks of experience.
Yeah, and even if you want to break up,
put on their best, sort of put on their best foot forward.
Yeah, your vacation boyfriend and girlfriend, and when you want to break up, you're living in the same studio apartment. It's not a good situation.
Should we start
singing? It is not good.
Should we start singing "Summer Lovin'" from Greece?
It's true. Wait, I wanted to take a turn here and ask you. So you've always written, and you're a really good writer and good at the communication. How and when did you decide this is what you want? This is the turn your career would take? Because you did a postdoc,
Yeah. I mean, during my postdoc that I think I decided to start working towards making communication stuff more of what I was going to do. While I was doing that, I was thinking, I will kind of gradually work towards this. I will, after my first postdoc, now you have to get a second postdoc or get a job in industry, and kind of continue to do the blogging and everything, all of that stuff, kind of on the side in quote unquote free time, which is usually sleep deprivation time. But then my wife got a really good job offer here in South Carolina teaching, so that gave me a lot more flexibility to, in this past year, sort of spend much more time focused on communication and sort of his alternative career from the standard researcher track. And in fairness, that was, during that time, that was when the Finch and Peas traffic really started to pick up. I started to get more attention, people actually wanting to interviewing me and ask me about what we were doing with the Finch and Pea and things like that. And that all kind of was converging within sort of the same 12 months about apparently I seem to have something somewhat unique to offer this that people are actually, not just unique, but that some people actually seem to be interested in and useful. And so that was, I would say, it was sort of in, when finally now? I'd say it was sort of in 2011 to sort of that 2011 to 2012 realm was when, because it would be sort of halfway through 2011, because that's when I went to the Science Online conference for the first time. It was at the beginning of 2012, but I had to decide to take the crapshoot of actually trying to get into it in 2011, and that was actually a key point. So the lab I worked in there was an RNA alternative splicing lab, Yernay Ule. He's now in, I'm going to blow this, at King's College, London. There's so many colleges in London that and again, another one where an advisor or a mentor, picked very interesting projects, good job offer for a postdoc, but also someone that I knew that going, having 2 kids and being a postdoc was somebody that was very supportive of the kind of work-life balance that my life needed. But while I was there, there was the RNA conference, sort of the RNA research community in the United Kingdom, was essentially at the same time as the Science Online, and I had to pick which one I was going to go to.
Wow.
Before the Science Online registration even opened, so I couldn't try to get in, see if I got in or not, and then do the RNA conference. I had to go all in.
Jesus.
I don't play poker very much, but it's like going all in before you see, drawing before you see what cards come out.
No doubt.
Yeah, so, like that. The Science Online conference is intense to get into.
I would say not as, and it wasn't quite as intense then, but as it was last year, and it's going to be this coming year, I'm sure. But but it was but it was, I mean, that was sort of because wound up we were in England, so I had to come back. We were coming over to the United States for the holidays anyway, but extend my trip here by a week, which, given European vacation time, wasn't that big of a deal. But extend the vacation so I could go to that, and I had to make the decision to. I didn't have to make the decision about the vacation time, but I had to make the decision to forego sort of an important professional conference in the research realm to go to this the writing conference. And again, and my mentor was very supportive of it, all of that. So, but that was probably, when you ask me in 30 years, that'll have become like the pivotal. It was sort of a gradual progression, but that was the pivotal moment. At that conference is where I met Marie Claire Shanahan, who is now she was at the University of Ontario in Edmonton. She's now at the University of Calgary, and she was our first writer for the Finch and P that wasn't Mike or myself, and she started writing about music and sort of music and science for us, and that's where I met her and got her writing, and around the same time as when we started getting more attention, and our traffic started to sort of accelerated from there. So that was a going to that conference was a very pivotal moment for me in sort of the career decision making.
That's pretty cool. You don't often see such a cut and dried this is where it starts kind of thing. Well, I mean, obviously it was like you say, it was a gradual thing, but that's a pretty harsh.
Well, in part this is too because the Science Online thing was very it's becoming a little bit less so, but was very dominated by people that were in sort of science communication journalism, writing, and their scheduling on when you have to register for conferences and stuff is totally disconnected from when scientists do, where it's like, oh, you got to do everything 6 months in advance because then you got to have abstracts and all of this stuff. So the decision-making time frame was just completely disconnected from each other. So
I mean, besides the fact that you have to like stay online, like I was waitlisted the first year, which was fine. I got in, but I mean that second year, people were just like freaking out.
Yeah, well, and like inside baseball, that conference had to deal with the challenge of like every time they do it, they figure out the registration system, and then they get this massive increase in interest that even if it doesn't technically break the registration system, it can like spiritually break it.
Yeah.
So people don't think it's fair, and they've actually worked really hard on that, but it's just difficult because the demand has escalated so much so quickly that it's like they can fix last year's problem and try to make it more robust, and then something else, and then the increased demand creates some new challenge they have to deal with.
Yeah.
So
unanticipated growth. They're just too successful at Science Online.
Yeah, and of course, and then people do stuff that you're not anticipating them doing, and that a classic problem in sort of user interface things that people don't behave the way you expect them to, and they certainly don't behave the way your test subjects do.
It is, but registering for that conference is akin to getting concert tickets. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and frankly, stories like what I'm telling, where it's like all of a sudden, we went to the conference, met a couple people that became our new writers, and all of a sudden our traffic jumped up 10 times, and because we got the new writers, and you're getting to do guest blogs for Scientific American and things like that. And so people see that, and then they want in because it's like, oh, if I go there, I'll be successful. That you'll get to meet these people, network, and therefore be successful. Which, I don't know if I'm successful, but it certainly has more successful than I was before I went. But I'm not sure it necessarily, that it necessarily works that way. But that kind of stuff certainly does help to stoke demand for it now, I think. And it's and frankly, it's a good conference, a really good time.
Yeah, I think it's really fun. I was really flattered when, especially like younger, like undergrads or even adults would say, "Oh, I know you. Like I read your blog." And I was like, "Really? Really?"
Yeah. And you occasionally meet decent people there, like Heidi.
Also a decent person.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to win the Lemur Tour lottery the first year. I was really excited.
Yeah.
Amazing.
There are lotteries within lotteries at these.
Yeah,
conferences.
exactly. I won the Lemur lottery this past year as well, but I gave up my spot because I felt so guilty.
I went into the sewers. I figured I didn't even put in for the Lemur lottery because I figured there are some people that I think cannot possibly get enough lemur, but I have a really good memory for things like that. So I was pretty satisfied with my lemur contact.
And I've been to Madagascar. I've seen you can't see enough lemurs. A sheephawk, no, you can't see enough.
I'm surrounded by cute on a daily basis, so it's not like
I understand.
I think I'm kind of inundated with cute, and so I don't have to. The tank
so
is full.
You wanted to go the opposite and go to the sewers.
I don't have a need. Yeah. It's like when you drink too much coffee and your ability to respond to caffeine is diminished.
Immune to cute.
Yes, that is one of the cutest things I've ever seen. Yeah.
Yeah, you develop a tolerance. So how many?
It can't hug me, So.
How many writers do you have for Finch and P?
We have 8 right now. Myself, Mike. It gets Marie Claire, who isn't much of a writer right now because she's busy switching jobs and locations and all of that. Michelle Banks, who is a artist who does some of her work is really science inspired, and she does a great job of finding other science inspired art to write about. So that's my brother Ben, who does our food stuff. He's a chef. Eva Amson, who works for the faculty. I always forget how they're supposed to, but F1000. Right, so that's 6.
Don't forget me.
I'm not forgetting you. You're right here, so I'm not gonna. I just forget who I mentioned.
There's a girl. Maybe she's not a regular right one, but her last name is Naylor. She went to university.
Oh yeah. And Sarah. Sarah actually went to graduate school at Washington University also, and she just tends to pick up sort of random, interesting science stories and write about them. She actually is doing her postdoc at the NIH. And then, and Eva writes about travel. She gets to travel quite a bit, and so she writes about the cool sciencey places that she gets to travel to. And then also Heidi co-posts her stuff about cool animals from Nature Afield with us also, so that hopefully between the two of us, a lot more people can get to see cool, sometimes cute, sometimes kind of ugly and fun animals. The snapping turtle one, which that thing is a pretty and ferocious critter, but that one actually was really popular with people. Although
it's weird.
They can't. If you find the right picture, they can be cute even as adults.
Yeah, they are pretty amazing, and like the whole like lure thing. I mean, there's some cool stuff out there.
They're very cool animals, and and part of the problem is actually for them is. I mean, you can do the Carl Zimmer thing and just find baby ones, and that'll be cute. But
he posted that video of like walking down the stairs.
Baby, everything is cute, but adult snapping turtles can be very beautiful animals. It's just people tend to try to get pictures of them where they're looking nasty.
Yeah.
And they can do that too. I mean, but so can my dogs. My dogs can be absolutely adorable, or they can look terrifying, depending on what's going on. So. so can my kids, frankly.
I was going to say, I hope you don't say that about your children.
They're very adorable, or you get them at full screen, when they've missed bedtime. Yeah. So.
Awesome. Well, we got to wrap it up there for the week, but where can people follow along with you and your many endeavors and the Finch and Pea?
So the absolute best place to go is thefinchandpea.com, which is the blog, and you can track down everyone associated with the Finch and Pea there. You can follow the Finch and Pea on Twitter at Finch and Pea. The "and" in all cases is spelled out because the internet doesn't like ampersands.
Who does?
And Vanna White. And you can follow me on Twitter at Josh Witten, JoshWitten.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Josh, for joining us this week. And if
Thank
you're
you
listening,
for having me.
No problem. And if you're listening at home, you can find us at breakingbio.com or on Twitter at breakingbio. I hope you join us next week when we'll have a new guest and we'll be rolling into the fall semester with all new crazy stuff. So, catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.